Hello folks, welcome to Chapter 14, The Basic Tools of Finance.
The financial system coordinates saving and investment. Participants in the financial system make decisions regarding the allocation of resources over time and handling risk. So in the financial system, we are participants, right? What we are going to do is we need to decide how to allocate our resources or how to allocate our money, to put our money in what ways, like to save it in the bank, to buy the bonds or buy stock, how to allocate them. And then before we decide our decisions, we need to know the risk of different assets. So that's the financial system. And for finance, it's the studies of how people make decisions regarding this kind of situation. That's the finance. Before, we want to know the value. So there are two terms. The first one is the present value, and the other is the future value. So these two equations are important. Present value. The present value of a future stock. The amount of money today, PV, needed to produce a future amount of money in the future. So the future value is FV, given prevailing interest rate. So PV, the present value, equals future value divided by 1 plus R to the nth power. The interest rate usually is bigger than 0, right? So 1 plus R is bigger than 0. So the denominator is bigger than 1. And the future value divided by a number which is greater than 1. So usually the present value is smaller than the future value. So when we talk about the nominal figure, usually future value is bigger than the present value. The future value of a sum, the amount of money in the future, FV, that amount of money today, PV, that's the present value, will yield, given prevailing interest rate. So the PV value and the present value and the future value, kind of the same equation, just you move these two terms in different side, right? If you put the future value on the left-hand side and the PV on the right-hand side, then you are going to get this equation. So PV, future value, equals to present value times 1 plus R to the nth power. Again, since 1 plus R is bigger than 1, so future value usually bigger than present value in the nominal figure. What is the future value of this amount in 3 years? So let's see how to calculate it together. In this question, we have the present value, which is $200 today, and the interest rate is 5%. So if just in 1 year, the future value equals to the present value, which is 200, and times 1 plus R, right? And that's the future value in 1 year. And if it is 2 years, then N should equals to 2. And that number for 2 years, that's 220. In 3 years, that's to the 3. And that's 235 instead of 31. So, and to the nth year, the future value just to the nth. So this is easy calculation. And the next one was the present values in this one. So that's the question. Give you present value and the interest rate. You should figure out the future value. This one, you know the future value, and the interest rate year was the present values. So we need to find the present value of $20,000, right? And the R is 8%, and it's 4 years. So all we need to do is just plug in all the numbers in that equation. The future present value is the unknown variables. So the result is $14,700. So for these two example questions, that's really easy. If you remember the equation, just plug in the number. Again, this is the compounding rate. That's the reason why we use 1 plus r to the nth power, right? Other than that, the interest rate should be 1 plus n times r. So the only reason is to the nth power is we are using the compounding interest rate. So compounding means the accumulation of a sum of money where the interest earned on the sum earns additional interest. Because of the compounding, small differences in interest rate lead to big differences over time. And we are going to see how different in the next example question. The third part for the compounding interest rate is the rule of 70. So this rule of 70 is easier for you to calculate the double time. If an amount grows at a rate of X% per year, that amount will double in about 70 over X years. So when we are using the compounding interest rate, this equation of this rule of 70, that's easier for you to calculate how many years you can double your asset. So why the small differences in interest rate lead to the big difference over time? We are going to watch this example together. So if you have $1,000, if you want to buy a Microsoft stock with that amount and hold it for 30 years, assume there is no dividend or anything, just this amount of money. The rate of return is 0.08 or 10%. What's the future value it is? If the rate of return is 8%, then still put all the numbers in that equation, so you will get this number. If the rate of return is 10%, you can get this amount. You can see the difference between two returns is just 2%, right? From 8% to 10%. But for 30 years, if the time is long enough, which means your asset, even though just the rate of return is only 8%, but over 30 years, your asset are almost 10 times, right? From $1,000 to $10,000. It's already 10 times. But if you increase your rate of return only by 2%, from 8% to 10%, and still with the same amount of time, your future value would be almost close to $20,000. Even though just 2% with 30 years, and the difference for the future value almost twice, or double. From 8 to 10, your future price or value almost double. So that's the reason why only a small change of the rate of return or interest rate. But if I give you a long enough time, the difference will be huge. So for the $1,000, how to double it? How many years I need to double? With the 8% of interest rate, how many years I can double my asset? So use the rule of 70. You can easily get the years. Use 70 divided by 8. That's the rule of 70, right? 70 divided by x percent. That's the interest rate. You can get if the interest rate is 8%, you are going to need 8.75 years to double your asset. But if the interest rate increased from 8% to 10%, and you only need 7 years to double your asset from $1,000 to $2,000. So that's how you use the rule of 70. All in all, a 2% increase in the rate of return from 8 to 10 leads to over 7,000 of additional interest earned over 30 years. This question explains why small differences in interest rate lead to big differences over time. How about this one? That's how people make decisions, right? When you know the interest rate, the present value and the future value, that's how you make decision, how to allocate your resources. So this is how we need to do to figure out the answer in this question. We need to find the present value of $800 million in 10 years. That's the future value, that's the interest rate, and 10 years, we can get that present value is this amount of dollars. Since the cost is smaller than the present value, that's the future money, that's the revenues I can earn in the future, right? And convert it into today's money, that's higher. That should be the revenue today, right? If convert the revenue in the future to today, that's the today's revenue, which means today's benefit is bigger than today's cost. Then PG and E should build it. But if the interest rate increase from 4% to 8% with the same equation, I can get the present value is only $370,000. So this amount of future revenue convert it to the present value. That's the present revenue here, right? And the present revenue is smaller than the present cost, which means cost is bigger than the benefit. So PG and E shouldn't build it. First off, for this type of questions, what you need to do first is just figure out what the present value is, because it already gave you the future value, right? Figure out the present value, and then you need to compare with the cost and the benefit. If benefit is bigger than the cost, then take that action. If cost is bigger than the benefit, then give it time. Although this is different scenarios, but the question are basically the same, right? This is the answer, and the same calculation like the last one, right? Up until now, that's just the basic decision. If you know the future value, that's easier for you to make a decision, right? But usually, that's impossible. Then we are going to talk about different people's like personalities or something, like risk aversion. Risk aversion. Most people are risk averse, which means they dislike uncertainty. People dislike bad things happening to them. That's the risk aversion. Or the people are risk averse. So we need to learn why that happens, and we need to learn the utility. A person's subjective measure of well-being or satisfaction. It follows the diminishing marginal utility. Help explain why most people are risk averse. So usually this is the utility figure. Looks like this. It's a concave curve. So the definition of marginal utility, MU, the amount by which total utility would change with consuming an actual unit of a good or service. So the definition of diminishing marginal utility, which means if I increase the same amount of no matter it's good, service, or wealth, the additional actual unit will decreasing, right? The biggest marginal utility is kind of smaller and gets smaller and gets smaller. That's the law of diminishing marginal utility. The principle that consumers experience diminishing additional satisfaction as they consume more of a good or service during a given period of time. I think it's easier to understand, like such as I'm so hungry at this moment, so I want to buy a pile of pizza. With that pile of pizza, my satisfaction will increase a lot because I was hungry before. And after I ate one pile of pizza, I buy another pile of pizza. At that time, maybe I still feel happy because I have more food to fill myself. But the satisfaction compared with the first pile of pizza is different. Because when I had no pizza, I was hungry. My satisfaction was so low. And after I already ate one, then my satisfaction after one pile of pizza is not that low. So when I ate another one, the actual unit of utility will not increase as the same amount as the first one. And also you can imagine the good as wealth. If I'm poor, I have no money, I live in the street. If someone gave me $1,000, I can use that amount of money to live for a month. That will change or improve my satisfaction, my happiness a lot. But what if I already have $1 million? I don't know if I buy some lotteries and I earned another $1,000. So that $1,000 means almost nothing to me, right? Compared with I have $0 versus $1 million. Although I add the same amount of money, like $1,000, but to zero, that marginal utility increased a lot. But for $1 million, that increase almost zero. That's the law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, if you understand the diminishing marginal utility, that will explain the risk aversion. Here. The utility function, that is concave curve, right? Because of the diminishing marginal utility. Diminishing marginal utility, such as at the beginning, my wealth is here, and that's my original utility. If something happened, I lose $1,000, and that will decrease my utility, right? According to my utility curve. If my wealth decrease $1,000, then my new utility will decrease this amount of utility. But what if I earn $1,000, the same amount of money, but the utility gain from winning $1,000, this amount is smaller than this amount, right? That's the diminishing marginal utility. And that's the reason why most people are risk averse. Just because people hate loss compared with earn the same amount of money. Just because when they decrease the same amount of wealth, the utility decrease, that amount will be bigger than the utility gain if you earn the same amount of money. That's explained the risk aversion. So managing risk with the insurance. How insurance works. A person facing a risk pays a fee to the insurance company, which in turn agree to accept all or part of the risk. That's the insurance, right? I think almost all of us have bought some insurance before, and that's the definition for insurance. But why insurance allows risk to be pulled, and that can make risk-averse people better off? So let's see the picture on the left-hand side here. That's the normal people, right? The utility curve is a concave curve. Imagine this point here is my original wealth. And I don't know, maybe there's some chance, like 50%, I'm going to lose the asset of $1,000, 50% to lose $1,000. So if I do not buy the insurance, what's my expected utility? So expected utility should equal to 50%. If I do not lose that $1,000, right? So that's my original wealth, and that's point A is my utility if I didn't lose anything. That's the utility of A. That's only 50% of UA. Plus, there is another 50%, right? Another 50%, I'm going to lose $1,000. So after I lost $1,000, my new utility should at point B, right? That's my new wealth, and that's my new utility here. So that should be the utility of B. And again, it's 50%. Utility of B. And if I do not buy, this is expectation of N here. N here stands for no, I do not buy the insurance. And that should be my expectation of my utility, what my utility would be in the scenarios that there is 50%, I'm going to lose $1,000, and what is my expected utility. So after that equation calculation, you can find out the point C is the utility of, or expected utility of N without buying any insurance. Right, the midpoint of A and B, 50% of this value and plus 50% of this value, that would be point C, a straight line, the midpoint of straight line. So this is the utility for that equation, UN. But what if the insurance, such as at this moment I have a chance to buy the insurance and the premium is $500. Again, because the chance for me to lose $1,000 is 50%, right? So the premium for the insurance, of course, it should be $500. Use the amount of lose times the chance. And for that insurance, that is going to accept all the risk. If I lost $1,000, then that risk belongs to the insurance company, it's not to me anymore. So in that case, if I pay $500, this is the new wealth I'm going to have, this one. So with the new wealth, draw a vertical line, intersect with the utility curve. That's D point here. This is D, and that's the utility with the insurance. Which means if I buy the insurance, I'm going to spend the $500, right? That's my original wealth and minus 500. If I lost $1,000, that risk is not me anymore. That $1,000, the insurance company are going to pay that amount of money. So my final wealth will still be the original value minus 500. What if nothing happens? There is 50% that nothing happened. And still, my new wealth is still here. Because this $500 I need to pay for the premium. So no matter if that loss happens or not, my new wealth will be constant, will be certain. Is this amount of wealth. So there is no chance, 50% of 50%. So my new utility is UI. So according to this figure, you can see the utility if I buy the insurance is bigger than the utility if I do not buy the insurance. And that's the reason why, and that also explains that the insurance allows risks to be pulled and can be make risk-averse people better off. So, two problems in insurance markets. You need to know how to distinguish these two, all right? So the first one is adverse selection. A high-risk person benefits more from insurance, so it's more likely to purchase it. The example could be like people with chronic illness have more incentive to buy health insurance provided it converts their treatment than other people. Another problem is moral hazard. Definition is people with insurance have less incentive to avoid risky behavior. The example is people with good fire insurance. They have less incentive to replace the batteries in their smoke detectors. So my way to distinguish these two terms is for adverse selection. Usually that's before you buy the insurance, right? Before you buy the insurance, if you think it's risky for you, that's a high risk for you. Of course, I'm willing to buy it. If you think I'm not risky, then I'm not going to buy it. So for adverse selection, that's before you buy the insurance. And for moral hazard, that's usually after you buy the insurance. Because for people who already have the insurance, they will not be that cautious as before. So that's how I distinguish these two terms. And you can choose your ways. But you have to remember these two. That's important terms in this chapter. Adverse selection and moral hazard. Which one belongs to adverse selection and which one belongs to moral hazard? Again, this is after buying, right? So it should be moral hazard. Because her insurance covers already buying this stuff, so that's moral hazard. And for this one, just before that group of people decided if they are going to buy or not, it depends on if they are risky or not. So the second one is usually before the decision, right? The decision before the insurance, so it should be the adverse selection. Diversification of firms' specific risk. So first of all, you need to understand the standard deviation. It measures the volatility of variables. So I have some examples here. Such as I have two assets, asset A and asset B. For asset A, I have there are four different results, and for each one is 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. So for asset A, there is a quarter percent that I'm going to earn 200% of my asset. The second result could be a quarter percent that I'm going to earn 100% of my asset. For another result is I get nothing. I will not lose anything or I will not gain anything either. So 0. And another 25% is I'm going to lose all of my assets. For asset B, I have 3 results. So a third of them is I'm going to lose 25% of my asset. Nothing happens and earn 25%. So according to the definition, which one has the higher standard deviation? Hey, the difference is too big, right? I have some chance to double my asset. Not double, it's 3 times, three folds. And all double, there's some chance that I will get nothing. I think that's just for gambling people or the risk lovers. At least for me, I do not like that. Because I hate the 4th result. But for option B or the second asset, the deviation is not that huge. The biggest difference is just plus or minus 25%. So which means for A has a higher, what should I say? Higher standard deviation. Higher standard deviation also means the higher risk here. So you can remember something like the standard deviation also equals to risk. If standard deviation is higher, which means the risk is higher, right? So that's kind of like the definition of standard deviation. And when we talk about asset, like stocks, bonds, and anything else, savings, we need to understand the risk, right? And sometimes we say the standard deviation. We should know standard deviation, and we know the risk. And after that, we know how to make our decision. The diversification, the reduction of risk, achieved by replacing a single risk with a large number of small, unrelated risks. So for this one, it's just the reduction of risk, alright? It's not eliminate risk. For the second one, if you choose if you choose a large number of small, unrelated risks, then in that way, or diversification, you can eliminate here. That's the eliminate. Firm specific risk. That's usually just one single firm, all right? Because you do not buy one firm's stock or bonds anymore. You buy a huge number of different stocks. That will eliminate the specific firm's risk. So for this one, for one firm, a single company, you can eliminate it with the diversification, but not for the market risk. Market risk, you can imagine like a pandemic. When a pandemic happens, all stocks, all indexes decrease, all assets price decrease, right? That's a market risk. You cannot eliminate it. It happens, and then economy will decrease. Again, diversification could reduce the risk and can eliminate the one firm, one company or firm specific risk, but cannot eliminate market risk. Okay, so we can see that's 4 graphs for the different companies' stock price, and I use 1 year. That's 1 year's movement. You can see that like sometimes for different areas company, for this is the airline company, that's the technology for the Zoom. Like after the pandemic, lots of people use Zoom for meeting, for class, and this is Pfizer, a pharmaceutical company. And the last one, the right bottom corner is the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So what's the definition of firm's specific risk? You can see during the same amount of time, like this period, from March of 2021 to the today, the price for Pfizer, the price almost increased, right? But at the same time, the price for Delta Airlines almost decreasing. So that's called the specific or firm-specific risk. During the same period, some firms their returns could increase, but some other firms the return could decrease. And you can also see the Zoom at the beginning period, it increased a lot. That's the beginning period of the coronavirus. So which means if you only choose one stock, one firm stock, you are going to bear a huge risk, right? You don't know what the price will look like in the future. Maybe for this one, it doesn't move at all, but for the Zoom video, it increased a lot. What you can do for diversification, that's the Dow Jones Industrial. That's the combined 30 major companies price, right? So the price for the index or the Dow Jones Industrial Average, basically it just keep moving. So that eliminate the specific or firm-specific risk, right? When the price goes down, and for the Dow Jones, it's still some kind of going up. That could eliminate the firm-specific risk. But when something happened, that's the market risk. You cannot avoid it. The firm's price usually went down during that period because that's the market risk. You cannot eliminate. What you can do just decrease or decline that risk. So these 4 pictures tells you like what you can do. The diversification, reduce or eliminate or not. Alright? So the next part is reducing risk through diversifications. When we increase the number of stocks, reduce firm-specific risk, which is the definition of diversification, right? You can see if I have only one stock here, the number of stock in portfolio. If I only have one, and the risk or standard deviation, because remember, standard deviation also kind of means the risk. So if I only have one firm stock and put all of my money asset into one firm stock, then the risk or standard deviation would be really, really high. But at the same time, my return would also high. Portfolio return would be also high. Remember that higher risk means higher return. That's what we learned before. Let's again remember the relationship between risk and interest rate of return. There are 4 characteristics. The first, the term, credit. Credit and tax and the inflation. For terms, it depends on if it's long term or short term, right? So the long term, remember, long term means higher risk. And for the bond, they usually give you a higher returns. For the credit risk, for the default company, which means higher risk, right? High probability of default means high risk, and also means higher return. For the tax, if only for municipal bond, this bond has no tax. No tax, which is good for this asset or for this bond, then the risk is lower, which means the return should be low. Positive relationship between risk and return. And also for the inflation protection. If some bond is indexed, which means that this is good, right? It's correct for inflation. And also the risk. There is no inflation risk, so risk is lower, then the interest rate is lower again. So the relationship between the risk and the returns is always positive. So it's the same as this picture here. If I only have one stock in my portfolio, then my risk or standard deviation will be really, really high, but the portfolio returns could be higher. Well, I increased the number of stocks in my portfolio from 1 to 40. You can see the risk or standard deviation decrease, but also my return is also going to decrease. When I have a huge enough number of stocks in my portfolio, my returns is converged to some number of returns. It will not equal to 0 or close to 0 because there's still some market risk there, right? The market risk means some other like revenue or interest rate there. If there is a risk, there is going to be some interest there. So that's what this figure means. With the number of stocks in portfolio, then your risk is going to decrease and the same as your returns because there is a positive relationship between risk and return. The trade-off between the risk and return, as I wrote in the blackboard over there, riskier asset pay higher returns, right? Riskier and higher returns. on average to compensate for the actual risk of holding them. So according to the history and over the past 200 years, the average real return on stock 8% per year. Compared with bond, because the stock is riskier than the bond, right? Because for bond, remember, there are 4 entities could issue bonds: federal government, state government or local government, and also the large companies. For stocks, only large companies can issue them. Of course, the credit or whatever, the confidence, government is going to be higher than the companies. So which means for companies, for their stocks, has a higher risk. So, but the returns is the same over the past 200 years. That's according to the history. The return on stock is higher than the bond. The risk-return trade-off portfolio with 2 asset classes. You can see when my asset has no stock, and my risk is really low, and my return is still low, like 3%. You can imagine this as the 10 years US Treasury bond, right? That's the free risk bond or free risk rate, interest rate. If you have no stock, that's the safest interest rate you can earn per year. With the number of stocks or the percentage of stock you increase, your risk increase as well, or standard deviation, but also your return increase following the higher risk, and the same. Higher percentage of stock, higher risk, and also higher return. Portfolio with 2 asset classes, diversified group of risky stocks with an average return 8%. If the standard deviation, or you can imagine this as the risk. If the risk is 20%, then the average return usually like 8%. This is not usually, just based on history, alright? Last 200 history data. And for a safe asset with a return 3%, the standard deviation or risk equal to 0 is here. Increasing the share of stocks in the portfolio increases the average return, but also the risk. So positive relationship between risk and return. So asset valuation. When deciding whether to buy a company stock, right, that's what we are going to talk about. How to allocate our asset, how to save our money to buy stock or bonds. So if we want to buy the stock, we have to know if whether to buy this company stock or another company stock. You need to compare the price of that share to the value of the company. Stocks are undervalued if the price is smaller than the value. If the price is lower, then it's undervalued. I'm going to buy it because the price will go up. If the price is bigger than the value, then it's overvalued. The better choice option will be sell it, because the price will decrease, is higher than its value. And the fairly valued is price equals to value. So very different ways. The value of a share, PV, of any dividends. The value of shares equals to the PV, the present value of any dividends of the stock will pay, and also the present value of the price you get when you sell the share. So this equation tells you how to calculate the value of share. If you know the value of one stock share, then of course you can know the price today, right? Because you can see the price anytime you want. And then compared with these two, you will know if I'm going to sell this stock or buy this stock. The present value of any dividends, all right, and the present value of the price you are going to sell to answer this question. What's the value of share of AT&T today? This is the answer for the question. To calculate 4 numbers, right? Since you have dividend for 3 years and 1 for each year. In year 1 and every year you are going to earn $1 a day. And in 1 year, that dollar convert to present value is use the equation we learned at the beginning, divided by 1.1, that's the $1 in 1 year as present value. And that's $1, the dividend in 2 years convert to the present value. The dividend in 3 years and convert it into the present value. You are going to sell your stock in 3 years, which means for your stock, the price you are going to sell, you only need to calculate the year both in 3 years. Because first year and second year, you are not going to do anything for that. So the future value for your stock is $30 in 3 years. Convert it into present value is this amount of number divided by 1.1 to the third power. And that's the result. All right, that's the present value. This one is same, almost the same as the example questions we calculated at the beginning of this class. But in this one, you need to sum different present values together. That's the only difference. And that's also how you need to calculate the asset value or stock's value. If you know how to calculate the stock value and you know the price, of course you know when you should buy a stock and when you should sell that stock. But the problem is that when you buy the shares, you don't know what future dividend or the price will be, right? If you know everything, of course, it's easier to make a decision. But the question is, you don't know the dividend for the company. Because dividend depends on the future revenue for that company. If that company will perform well, which means the dividend will be high. If the firm will not perform well, which means the dividend will low. And also the price for that stock, you don't know what the price will be in the future. So that's the main problem to calculate the value of your stock. And how to solve that? There are 2 ways. To decide how do you buy the different stock. All right. The first way is the fundamental analysis. Fundamental analysis is the study of a company's accounting statements and the future prospects to determine its value. So many Wall Street firms hire stock analysts to conduct such fundamental analysis and offer advice about which stocks to buy. This is a general meaning of fundamental analysis, which means you need to do more research, lots of research, to decide what's the dividend, what's the future value, so on and so forth. If this firm will perform well or not. And if you believe this analysis or this method, what you need to do before you buy the stock, you need to do is all the necessary research yourself by, for instance, reading through the company's annual reports, to rely on the advice of Wall Street analysts, or to buy share in mutual funds. All right, that's one way to choose your stocks if you want to buy some. If you believe the fundamental analysis, that's what you need to do. And then another theory is you can close your eyes and then pick different stocks randomly. It doesn't matter. Or you can just think what initials you like or what names you like. You can pick them as your portfolio, as your stocks in your portfolio. It doesn't matter. And that method depends on or relies on the efficient market hypothesis. This theory that asset prices reflect all publicly available information about the value of an asset. Here, the price reflects the public information and all the information, all right? So all public information, which means all the people can see it, especially each company listed on the major stock exchange is followed closely by many, I mean, maybe thousands of money managers or analysts, right? They are going to keep their eyes on different stocks. if the public information are available to everyone, which means everyone will get the same conclusion. And the equilibrium of the supply and demand set the market price, it will result in the equilibrium. Since all the information are public and available to all of the professional managers, which means if the price is overvalued, lots of managers are going to sell this type of stocks, and the price will decrease back to the fairly value. If the price is undervalued, then lots of managers are going to buy this kind of stocks, which will increase the price of that stock up, equal to the fair value, right? So the equilibrium will end up at the intersection between supply and demand. That's the efficient market hypothesis. So, and if you believe this theory, then you can just close your eyes and pick stocks randomly. So, stock market exhibits informational efficiency. Each stock price reflects all available information. So again, it should be all public available information about the value of the company. If that really happened, which means the price will always be the value, a fair value. Otherwise, professional managers are going to do different ways, sell or buy. Stock prices should follow a random walk, the path of variables whose change are impossible to predict. This is easier to understand. When you buy a stock at this moment, you don't know for the next second the price will go up or go down. That's impossible to know, so that's the random walk. If the price reflects all available information, then no stock is better buy than the other. Just like you close your eyes and pick them randomly, right? Because all of them are equally, no difference. The best you can do is to buy a diversified portfolio. So for this hypothesis, all information, all the price, just according to the all available publicly information. Which means if there is a good news about that firm or about that stock, the price will go up immediately. That's the random walk, because you cannot predict what news will come up in the next second, all right? So if there is a bad news, then the price will decrease in the next second. So no matter the first or the second, we assume that all buyers and sellers are rational. They are rational people. They know what they are doing. They can calculate, they can see everything. They can evaluate all informations to get their conclusion if that price is overvalued or undervalued. But some theory called market irrationality, which means many believe that the stock price movements are partly psychological. J.M. Keynes' 1930s stock prices are driven by animal spirits of investors' irrational waves of pessimism and optimism. So this explains why some people or many people believe that the market is irrational. All right, it's not rational. If that's rational, then that's two methods you should choose. But usually that doesn't work, right? So that's this theory came out because the market is irrational, because they are pessimism and optimism. Alan Greenspan, 1990s stock market boom due to irrational exuberance. So the next term is the speculative bubbles. The price of an asset rises above what appears to be its fundamental value. That's the speculative bubbles. So what's the possibility of the speculative bubbles, or when that could happen? Value of stock to stockholders depends on when we evaluate our asset, we need to know the dividends, the stream of dividends, and also the final price. We can say, well, we sell, right? After that, we can calculate the present value. But for the final sale price, it not only depends on the firm's performance, it also depends on the other person's expectation. What's the opinions of the other person? If that person think the price should be higher or should be lower, because you need to sell your stock to the other person, right? So a person might be willing to pay more than a stock it's worth today if she expects another person to pay even more for it tomorrow. Which means it's really hard to decide or to calculate the other person's opinion. That's impossible to know. So which means that's impossible to know the final price. And that came up with optimistic and pessimistic, right? And that explains why the price will change all the time. And that's, if that happens, when people's emotion control their logic, then the speculative bubbles happens. Some debates between irrational and irrational. Irrational and irrational. Debate frequency and the importance of departures from rational pricing. Market irrationality. Their argument is the stock market often moves in a way that's hard to explain on the basis of the news that might alter the rational valuation, right? And that happens any second. So for the efficient market hypothesis, their argument is if the market were irrational, the irrational people should be able to take advantage of this fact and beat the market. Which means they assume that if the market is irrational, which means for the smart people, for the rational people, they can always calculate the present value, the price and the value that stock belongs to, and they are going to earn money all the time. But that's usually not happen. So that's the debate between these two. So in this part, you need to understand the different theories in these three parts. And all of these are all the materials in your textbook, and you need to remember